Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists, they did. They absolutely got it right. And this is Tom Navulis, your host, with my guest, Jim McNeil. It's so delighted to have Jim here on the program with us this week. And we are going to go through some real interesting stuff. We're going to take and pick up where I was talking last week on moral continuity and what does that mean? Where do we see that in life? Where do we see that in that whole concept of what I've been driving on this year and will continue to on political theology? So that's kind of like the theme of my programs this year is political theology. And what does that mean? So we're going to have fun with that because Jim's really involved in a lot of different ways. And one of the issues that we're really going to drive home on today for that moral continuity is that whole issue of libraries. Jim, what's a library for when you were growing up? I mean, come on, what were they?
Was a place to go to find wonderful books to read, to expand your knowledge, to expand your perspectives, to cement in your knowledge, and also to fight the battle against illiteracy.
Yeah. And when I did some historical work on it, libraries were that archive, that great archive. And now we have today, different things in there with the internet, and we can store terabytes of data at extremely low cost. So, I mean, we even have I have a massive digital library, and I'm sure you do as well. And, it just becomes really interesting to see that we're getting kids too inundated of what goes on with computers and trying to get them to go to a library to pull a real book out and read. But we've been hearing crazy things going on in libraries. Well, we're sitting here in Geauga County, Ohio. And for all of you that don't know out there, is that Geauga County is mostly a rural county. We have, as I always call it, a microcosm of a lot of other places in the U.S. We have our area that is the condensed metropolitan, if you will, for the size of county we are, where there's a density. And we have a dividing highway, which I call it the left side of the highway and the right side of the highway.
That's pretty well much said, Tom. Well said.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the left coast, and we're sitting in the middle of it all here. But it's systemic in what we're seeing. And in Ohio, how are the libraries overseen? How are they structured, Jim?
Well, under the Ohio Revised Code, the library is library district is put under the auspices of county government. Geauga County, for example, we have 7 members on the library board. 4 of which are appointed by the county commissioners, 3 of which are appointed by the common pleas judges. And they're each appointed for 7-year terms, with each one expiring every 7 years consistently on a regular basis. So we have one expiration each year through a 7-year cycle.
Okay.
But each individual is there for 7 years.
Right. Okay. So what we're under the Ohio Revised Code, this is a board. It's also a taxing authority, correct?
Yes.
So that means that it's not out of a general budget from the county commissioners. It's actually levies that come against the citizens' property taxes directly, and that's determined by that board. Not the commissioners they oversee to an extent. But it's really that board that determines whether a library is going to get built, how much money is going to be spent, all that. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And very interestingly, in Geauga County, if you look at every political entity in the county, the one that taxes and receives the most revenue and the one that spends the most revenue is the library.
That's
more
true.
Than the sheriff, more than the commissioners, more than the road department, more than any other entity in the county, the library.
Libraries.
That is in addition. I'm not sure the exact amount of money that Geauga County receives from the state of Ohio, but Speaker of the House Householder recently wrote a letter, and in that letter indicated that the state of Ohio puts $400 million a year into libraries
Yeah, that's
as well.
huge. Wow, that's statewide.
That's statewide.
Wow, that's a lot. Wow, that's a lot of double taxation, as I always say. When you look at what comes through the state and the revenues that they generate from all of the various mechanisms within the state, and then what the happens through the levies at the county level that continues with that. The interesting thing to me is that I'm seeing up in one of the areas north of here, there's a new library that's going in. I think Thompson is putting in a new library, and Bainbridge is putting in a new. What a fiasco that was! And
the money, unbelievable.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah, and so when we look at it, there's not just from what is the educational purposes and how do we reach through that, but how well is that board acting in a fiduciary manner for the taxpayer?
One needs only to go to the administrative headquarters for the library, which I call the Taj Mahal. Mm-hmm. They have the best of everything and plenty of it, and that includes people.
Yeah.
I just recently enrolled for a program. It's called the Mobile Media Preserving Center, something of that nature. Where the library itself has equipment where you can take 8mm film and all kinds of other media and transfer them onto a thumb drive, for example.
Cool. Yeah.
Or some other current electronic format.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. But it moves from place to place. I was going to go to the Chardon Library to see it, and I know it comes to Middlefield and other various branches. It's a training program, and then at one point you bring in your tapes and do the thing. And I said it would be wonderful if we had some hours available at the administrative center where we could come in and do it. Mm-hmm. And I was told, oh well, many people in the branches don't like to travel, so we take it to them out in the branches. Okay, fair enough. And we're looking at getting multiple units.
Yeah.
So do we really need multiple media transfer units for, to see me running around in my pajamas at age 5 years old that I want to preserve?
Right. Yeah.
Which is, by the way, also available through entrepreneurs in the commercial capitalist.
Yes.
It's available. Services are available.
Yeah.
So it's all fine and dandy and wonderful for the library to do it, but do we really need multiples thereof?
Yeah.
And it gets back to just about anything you look at the library, the best of it and many of them.
Yeah. And it goes hand in hand to a number of other discussions that you and I've had around, even local government, it turns into its own swamp. It takes and self-perpetuates itself in such a manner that it's like, what are you doing? What's really the value proposition that people are getting for their tax dollars?
And we have a well-defined mission for the library.
Mm-hmm.
The library's mission is to fight the war on illiteracy and to help folks get more comfortable and skilled with technology. Mm-hmm. Those are really the two major missions of the library. And where we run into trouble is when they go afield from their main mission.
Now, that's something that we're going to, and I got to ask, Kath, where are we at? What's that?
6.
We have about 6 minutes left. Great. So where we're going to take you right now, folks, you have to understand is that today's program, I really wanted to focus on the Sam Adams component of all politics are local. So, in summing up a little bit here is that what we have this taxing authority that is defined within the Ohio Revised Code, so that means that it's codified. It's something that is there. It's required to have a board to operate. You have county commissioners that can appoint the majority of members. Then you have the Common Pleas Court that then can appoint some members. When you unpack that, both the county commissioners and Common Pleas are elected people. So you have those folks that are responsible back to the electorate, as well as then that board has that responsibility. I'm sure in their bylaws it says something that they have a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens of the county and with a reportability to those appointing authorities.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that's usually what it says in the ORCs for every entity that is codified. But when we talk about going afield, and I want to do a little bit of a teaser here as we get into the second, and we'll carry through into the third segment. Now, this last month, Jim, you went to a very interesting meeting, and you had a few people that came with you, and we're going to talk about citizens taking and becoming more involved as we move into those, because I'm always telling people on the program, you got to get your butts out of your seats and your feet's on the streets. So
Please.
this is what we're driving to. And this is really important because what was that meeting that you went to? What was that, 3 weeks ago? About?
We've attended 2 of the board meetings.
Okay.
In January and in February.
All right.
And that attendance at the board meetings was precipitated by looking at the library's quarterly program guide.
Okay.
Wherein I was a bit surprised to find that the library is sponsoring a program of a teen roundtable
Mm-hmm.
to...
Well, isn't that good isn't that an educational thing to have a teen roundtable?
Indeed, it's educational.
Oh, okay.
Topics to be announced.
Oh.
and the topic of that meeting, which is to take place on March 30th at the Chardon Library,
Okay.
is the Teen Roundtable in a safe and open environment, just to talk about gender issues.
Hmm.
Gender issues.
Okay.
And that, when you combine any one of those 3 words with the other 2, you now have safe, open environment, and gender issues. You're building a chair,
Yeah.
and that chair is getting legs,
Yeah.
and it's too nebulous.
Now, if you take in the general population, you would think that they're going, well, a safe area to speak. Okay, shh, be quiet in a library.
Fine.
That's fine, and all of that. And then you're doing a round table, and the real question comes into, in my mind, and as we are going to carry it forward, is what are they defining as, and what is the question about gender issues? Did anything come of your attendance at those meetings?
Well, we didn't know exactly what the program was about.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told eventually that the program was about women's historical gender issues, to which I said, fine, call it that. You mean women getting the right to vote? Yeah, fine, call it that. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But safe, open gender issues is, you're laying a trail of crumbs here.
Yeah.
Who are you trying to get to come to this meeting?
And that becomes really interesting. And we're down to the last little bit of time here. So initially it was talking about, wait a minute, a teens roundtable, and now it's transitioning to women's gender issues. So they're going to define, and we're going to pick it up in the next segment, because I think that we're just kind of leaving those breadcrumbs that you just know for the listeners, is that the women have these gender issues so that they all know that they're women, right? I mean, that's what I would think. So where we're kind of going to step off at the moment is that when Sam Adams was looking at a lot of the issues of the day, he was very, very clear on his Christian belief system. And when he looked at what was happening in government, we knew that there were many things askew, and we could look at that period of time and we could see that there was a number of issues with, basic immoralities. But at the same time, there was that great awakening that brought people back to, God-centeredness, even within the context of governance. Mm-hmm. And that was the foremost thing that Sam was all about and what he was trying to drive home. And we're going to come back in the next segment when Samuel Adams returns, because those anti-federalists, they got it right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they got it right. This is Tom Navulish, your host, and so delighted that you are with me and my guest, Jim McNeil. He's a good friend of mine. And all of you out there that are on Liberty Works Radio Network, I am so happy that you just are faithful listeners. But in addition to that, that you are those subscribers that take and understand where that donate button is. You know where that is. This is a listener-funded network, and just really appreciate everybody that hits that donate button and contributes to keeping Liberty Works Radio Network on the air. And again, as I always say, this portion of the program, take a look at all those other hosts and hostesses. I mean, go look at what that live programming is during the week. There's some real interesting topics that I know that you will thoroughly enjoy. So with that, we are going to continue, Jim, and we're going to talk a little bit more on where we somewhat left off, is that we were looking at the county libraries, which are defined by the Ohio Revised Code. We have a board that then is appointed by both the county commissioners and the common pleas judges. They have taxing authority. They get some portion of $400 million from the state in addition to their local taxing authority. Their mission is to get rid of illiteracy and to further technology understanding is their primary missions. And yet you went to a January and a February meeting where when you were looking at the schedule, you saw something on there about a teen roundtable in a safe place for some kind of issues that you figured out were women's gender issues. What's that got to do with the teens?
Well, we didn't figure that out.
Oh, okay.
As we began our discussion with the board, I read a letter from Speaker of the House of Representatives of Ohio, Larry Householder.
Mm-hmm.
And in his letter, he indicated that he was quite surprised recently to find that there was a library that was holding classes in teaching teenage boys how to dress like drag queens.
What?
And he went on to say that I thought it was a joke. But he said, but then the joke must have been on the taxpayers, because Ohio's libraries are among the best and best funded in the nation, with $400 million a year of funding from the state.
Yeah.
And that their primary mission is the combat, the defeat illiteracy, and to help people get comfortable with technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically the library had veered off mission.
Now, this was one of the western counties that did that, or was it one of the counties closer to Columbus?
It was a county close to Columbus. I believe it was Newark or Delaware.
Okay, down there. I think I remember some things going on about that last year.
So I'm pretty sensitive to this gender issue in libraries because, as many people know, many libraries and a few really misdirected churches actually have drag queen reading hours for children now.
Right. Yeah.
And as horrible a thought that is, when I read over that quarterly program and saw that, that's the first thing that came to mind.
Sure.
And not knowing, I went trying to seek information and understand and find out precisely what it was that they were planning.
Yeah. Okay.
So as I read Speaker Householder's letter, when I opened, I first commended the board in their mission against illiteracy and congratulated them for doing a good job putting an effort to it. Then I told them that unfortunately, I have to demonstrate my literacy. I have something to read to them. And as I began to read, it was very interesting to watch certain board members' eyes rolling. Oh, my. Yeah. And when I got to the end of the letter, Speaker Householder said that the library needs to get back on mission, and his final sentence was, "I expect this to end immediately."
Interesting.
Then I said, that's from Larry Householder, Speaker of the House of Representatives of the state of Ohio.
Yes.
And at that point, it was somewhat of a realization, like, oops, it was a good moment.
They got caught.
Yeah, sort of.
So just the I didn't have the opportunity to be there, but
Yeah.
I can imagine that everybody's faces kind of going flush.
Yeah, well, they were very interested, and we had an ongoing discussion. Now, that particular meeting, we had about 15 people there,
Okay.
and several other people spoke as well, very eloquently, as a matter of
Mhm.
fact. All I did was read Householder's letter, and then there was an ensuing discussion about it.
Mhm.
Um, that meeting then closed. They thanked us for our contribution, and it closed. The following month, we went back,
Mhm.
and this time there were a host of other events going on that prevented people from coming, and we only had about 5 people at this meeting.
Right.
2 of which were actually journalists, and 3 that were speaker type people.
Right.
Uh, and they proceeded to circle the wagons and beat on us.
Mhm.
But there are only 3 of you, only 3 people.
Now that's always interesting because the majority of the time at a lot of these different boards, because I'm on a county board as well,
Mhm.
we get
No people.
no citizen
Exactly.
participation. So
Exactly.
when you start looking at that you ended up having 5 people.
Yeah.
That's relatively good representation.
This meeting got a little bit more testy.
Hmm.
They had obviously spoken amongst themselves before the meeting, and circled the wagons. At the conclusion of the previous meeting, 2 of the board members came and spoke with us and said how happy they were for us to be there and provide our viewpoints and so on. And those 2, well, one was missing at the second meeting, in the February meeting, but the other one turned 180 degrees around and became very aggressive toward us.
My goodness.
And I was a bit surprised at that.
Hmm.
But during that meeting, as I was attempting to speak, they said, "You're from Troy Township, right?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, that's part of the Burton Library System. You're not covered by us. You're not permitted to speak." And I said, "Excuse me." And I pulled out my wallet and I said, "From this wallet flows money to you through the state of Ohio. I indeed have standing."
Your standing was
continued.
even more than that. Your standing was greater by virtue that you're levied generally, not just particularly to that township, but because, as we've already established, and I think this is a critical component that you folks need to understand, especially those in Ohio that may be interested in what we're talking about, is that your primary standing is as a citizen of the county, and that is a codified board for the whole county. Yes, you may be in a specific district
Mhm.
on that, but as a generalized citizen, you have standing without question.
Right. I'm also a member of the county library through the Middlefield branch.
There you
So
go.
I use the facilities and so on.
Even better. Yeah.
But it was very, very interesting to see the wagons circled.
Sure.
And after I had finished speaking, they cut me off and said, "You're out of time." Said, I have more to say. "We're sorry, that's as much time as you have." And as other people began to speak, one of our other friends, Kathy Johnson,
Mhm.
began to read a report from the American College of Pediatrics
Mm-hmm.
talking about gender identity confusion and how most of it, untouched, resolves.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
those that are attended to, if you will, or encouraged, have much more serious psychological problems later in life.
Right.
These are very, very well documented medical studies.
Yeah.
And she was cut off as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me ask you, is there anything in which would be interesting to get a hold of if you already hadn't, is their bylaws where it establishes procedures for meetings and public participation. Have they ever taken and did formalize at a public meeting what the time limits would be for speakers?
Their bylaws are on their website. I was directed
Mm-hmm.
to the website. I asked, "Do you have your bylaws?"
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to see what they say.
Right.
And yes, you can have them. You'll have to pay for them. I said, "Okay, fine, understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's a freedom of information, public information request, and you pay for the copying services and
Right.
paper." All right, okay, fine. But I asked if they were on the website. Yes, they were. So I went there and checked it out. And it's very interesting. One of the main tenets of their bylaws is that we are a completely autonomous body.
Mm-hmm.
And in other words, they felt that they functioned without any oversight whatsoever.
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah. And that's systemic of, as you and I were talking earlier, and we may have mentioned in the first segment, a lot of these boards think that way.
Mm-hmm.
They think that they're appointed, and they're just because they have that separate codified development, the birth out of the Ohio Revised Code, that everybody else be damned, if you will. So that's interesting that they actually have that in their bylaws.
Right.
Boy, oh boy.
Right.
I bet the commissioners would have something to say about that.
That'll be one or two comments later.
Oh, good. We'll get to that in the third segment because we're kind of winding down on this segment right now.
Yeah.
But so how did that meeting finish off?
It finished off with all of us being denied the opportunity to speak because that was during the meeting, and you have 4 minutes to speak during the meeting. And that's where I wanted to find out what their bylaws had said. Mm-hmm. The bylaws actually say 5, which mm-hmm. is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But as the meeting ended, they said, "You're welcome to come up and speak to any of us after this meeting is over, but this is a public meeting and it is now adjourned." Motion, boom, done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So we did indeed stay afterward and talk. And I actually, at that meeting, I had proposed a compromise. Mm-hmm. I said, "I tell you what, this gender situation here," I said, "here's a compromise. How about if you cancel that program? And we'll provide for you a law enforcement professional to talk to the children about what to do when somebody offers them drugs or wants to sell them drugs." And the question came back from one of the board members, "Why would you want that?" And I said, "Why?"
Wow.
I said, "Because that's reality. That's a real issue that they face every day." I said, "This other is a delusion." And they said, "Oh, but it's your delusion."
So this goes, I mean, we chuckle at it at this moment, but the reality is that.
It wasn't funny at the time.
I'm sure it was. It would be, but it really hits into where the nation is.
Yeah.
And I sent you an article. We'll come to that in the third segment because I want to set that as another piece of the framework mm-hmm. as to why people think that we're delusional when we try to look at it from, wait a minute. What's the right thing to do for children? How do you want to raise your kids? Why is it that people want to develop children as something other than what they're born to be? I don't get that.
Nor do I.
Yeah. And so when we're looking at that, because the board that I sit on deals with mental health, and the big issue in the schools is this gender dysphoria. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, wait a minute, why should schools be dealing with that? And then as it gets to the teenage level, they're making all of these other types of accommodations that you sit there and you go, wait a minute, if you're supposed to be, an innie or an outie, how in the heck, do you want to, what does that mean? All of a sudden you're deciding I'm something else. What are you seeing elsewhere with that?
Well, I see that somebody a lot smarter than me made up the original rules.
Right?
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, there you go. But then when it comes into how do we look at that from a local political perspective, and we look at entities like whether it's the school boards or whether it's a library or whether it's any of the other boards that are out there, we're seeing that transition and that cultural war being given into, if you will. And it's a minority of people that are really pressing those types of issues. And when, again, looking at the rural county that we are in Geauga County, it becomes interesting to me that, you know what, we're getting springtime weather. Look, man, I got a different nice shirt on, and the farmers are getting ready to start plowing. So who cares what's going on at the library? Mama take care of it, Mm-hmm. But we have all these other things that are slipping in, and we're wondering, who the heck is taking and stepping on everybody's toes? Where are they getting their information from? And what's happening in that larger generalized library organization out there? Because we know at the national level,
yes,
they're really pushing this from a political agenda perspective
And they
for
are
that minority.
very, very organized.
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
organized.
No different than what happens with the likes of the NEA and some of the
Or
others.
climate change.
Whatever. Yeah.
Take your pick.
Yeah. Take your pick.
Take your pick.
And Sam Adams understood that very, very clearly. And he always brought it back to divine providence. And so did those anti-federalists. And we'll get back to it again as we hit that third segment. Come on back, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. Got it right. This is Tom Novolis, your host, and we have Jim McNeil, my good friend, and we've been having a great time in talking about libraries. I mean, you have to go back to that first segment to hear a little bit more on where we came in with the history and what it is here in Ohio. And remember, Sam Adams always said that all politics is local. And amazingly, libraries have become political. And not only that, libraries are promoting theology. In a way, is that right? I mean, you shake your head and you're going to scratch your heads and you're going to say, what do you mean, Tom, they're promoting theology? Well, when I look at it, when they start talking about, and go back into last segment, all you folks from Soaring Eagle, you need to get to that second segment and hear what happened to Jim in going to the library board meetings in January and February, and how the topic came about from this idea in the Chardon Library wanting to hold this teen roundtable, and it comes out to be around women's gender issues, but it kind of leaked into more than that. Is it more of all of the gender issues, and is that kind of where they're looking at taking it, Jim? I mean,
well, it was really interesting when we got into some detailed after-meeting discussions with individual board members.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the board members held a view that sex is what you're born with, gender is what you feel. And we had another interesting round of interchange there around delusion, since he's the one that said that was my delusion, not somebody else's delusion.
Yeah.
So, but to harken back to a point that you made about libraries entering into religion, indeed, I believe that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they also do so, board members, for example, people that frequent the library, I'm going to say this, but some folks do belong to church.
Mm-hmm.
And right. Many of the ones that are positing this particular brand of personal philosophy on gender and sex happen to come from a particular church.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular church must be missing the first book of Romans in their Bible.
Yeah.
Because mine sure says a whole bunch of different things than what they're preaching.
Yeah. Well, even the Old Testament. So a
Yeah.
lot of people miss that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But even under the new covenant,
yep.
This is a beloved Apostle Paul talking about this,
Mm-hmm.
and he's giving us concrete example lessons.
Yes.
Of what our conduct is to be and not
Mm-hmm.
to be.
Right.
So that part is missing, and it's so sad that it comes in through this particular church,
Mm-hmm.
which will go nameless at this particular moment. But
That's
I'm
fine.
sure you'll know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's the ones with the rainbow flags out in front of their church.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the ones.
Yeah.
And I have a great deal of problem with that because I grew up in that church. I was there during that takeover by the secular
my.
humanists, and
Yeah.
was denied the opportunity to speak at a synod meeting.
Oh my.
I was selected as a speaker as a 15-year-old boy, and prepared my presentation. It gave the topic and everything, and kept asking, "When's the meeting? When is the meeting?" Well, the meeting came and went without me being informed of the meeting.
Oh my.
That's how that went.
Yeah. So let me ask you there. You're a lifelong resident of Geauga County.
No, I'm not actually.
Okay.
But
But you know from a historical basis is what you're referring to with that particular congregation.
Oh yeah,
denomination,
that was
all
from
that.
the area where it began, actually,
Yes.
in the Lehigh Valley, northeastern Pennsylvania area.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That because I always thought you were from Pennsylvania there a little bit.
I am
but
northeastern Pennsylvania.
That's good.
You'll hear
Good.
something in my speech sooner or later that'll betray it.
Not at all. But what that really gets to is two different links that are in your references, folks, is one talks about how should Christians take and address the whole transgender or gender issue itself. And that's from one of the reform sites that I follow. Interestingly, that you hit right on one of the dots that's brought out in this, is that some people's approach is that gender, and this is the word changes and word definitions, is that gender is something that is in your mind. It's not biological.
It's fluid.
It's fluid.
Yep.
It's defined by the moment, if you will.
Yep.
And so what it does is it moves from what I mentioned in the first segment and last week was that moral continuity. So if we're going to have that moral continuity, there has to be, as you said, someone smarter than us that defined it all in the first place. And we know, from biblical Christian perspective and from my reform perspective is that, that it's a God-defined issue, period.
Not only
End
that,
of story.
he designed it.
He designed it.
He
There
made
you go.
the entire universe by speaking, but man he made with his own hands.
Yeah, right.
According to the master design.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Yeah, for us to be in his image.
Yep.
And so when we look at that, and then when we look at people going off into all the other tangents, what that means, and then trying to promote it, politicize it, bring it in from their religious point of view, not the biblical point of view, not the God-ordained point of view, but in a manipulative sort of way. But this one report that I sent to you, and you and I kind of looked over, and you chuckled about it. Very interesting. It's a Pew report, so it's in your references, folks, and it talks about views of transgender issues divided along religious lines. Now, I'll put these charts up, and the charts are coming up behind us right now, so you'll be able to see that what we have here is 6 in 10 Christians say gender determination at birth. 6 in 10 religious nons disagree. So it's a percentage of who say that whether a person is a man or a woman. And the way that this is broken out is Christians in general is determined by the sex at birth. 63% of the Christians in general say, yeah. Then can it be different from sex at birth? Folks, 35% that are Christians in general. Then it's broken out. Protestants in general, 68% say, yeah, it's birth. Then you have that other 30% there going, it could be different. White evangelicals, it moves to 84%. And then the 15% that go, well, and that shocked me.
Me
that
too.
White evangelicals, that there's 15% out there that are, going, well, it may be whatever you think you are tomorrow.
Well, they might be the people that just come for the entertainment to the mega churches.
True, and
Those
they just
15.
hang their hat on that label.
Right.
Okay. Then when we were looking at white mainline, and the mainline are those mainline denominations that are interesting. 55% agree that your birth determines your sex, and then 44%, you're fluid, which is interesting. And that probably is part of that other group that you were talking about with the rainbow flags and that they could be, and they may be down into the other ones. So then you talk about Black Protestants, which was also surprising based on their ideas of family and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that there's also a lot of issues in the Black Protestant churches as well.
Now that particular statistic there should be further subdivided
Yes.
into Black evangelicals
Yes.
versus the Black Protestants, because the Black Protestants will be part of that bigger panoply of the liberal churches.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to find virtually identical stats between Black and white.
I'd agree with that.
I believe that.
Yeah, that would be one that, they should go back and revisit.
Yeah.
But with the Black Protestants, 59% agreed that it is sex at birth is what makes that determination, and therefore 36%. Now, where it really goes, I was shocked as well, was with Catholics. Only 51% of the Catholics think that your sex is determined at birth, whereas it's 46% that they're, no, it could be whatever. And then your unaffiliates, you'd expect this. 37% think it's sex at birth, 62%. Now we're seeing that, here we go, it goes upside down.
Yeah.
And Paul talks about the upside downness, as you mentioned earlier. So that upside downness is unaffiliate is the 37%, and 62% say you could be whatever you want to be. Atheist agnostics, 29%. It's sex at birth, 71% is have a heyday. And nothing in particular, so people don't even know what they are religiously, let alone know what they are gender-wise, and maybe they haven't checked down south to figure it out biologically either. But 43% say it's determined by sex at birth, and then the 57% is, interestingly, have a day. There's other charts and other information. I think the report was very interesting, but so I guess it comes down to, when I look at it from that religious perspective, is that it's not just about religion, but as we know, as solid biblical believing Christians, it's more than just evangelical or a label. It's what your relationship is with God.
Precisely.
And understanding then, when we look at what all that means and how it's defined, and then it gets down to what was it that board member said?
My delusion?
Your delusion.
My delusion.
Yeah. So delusion and reality will be faced, at some time other than this present moment. But one thing that I always tell people is that you live your eternity now. So whatever you believe and whatever your orientation is around that belief system is going to, it's now, because we have no guarantees of anything in the future. So when we start looking at this now, what are some of the things that you're looking at in relationship? And we got about 3.5 minutes left. So what are you looking at to happen next with this, with the library board?
Well, we did have a meeting with the county commissioners,
Okay.
Who were completely unaware of this, and all three commissioners were equally appalled by it, and had promised to ensure that the library will indeed know that they do, in fact, answer to somebody on this, because they were appointed by the commissioners. The commissioners were elected by the community with a given set of community values that would be reflected through the administration.
Right.
And if the library board members did not feel that was the case, they would be removed.
Good.
That's what we were told.
Yeah.
One of the big things that got it to that point was us asking the question of, when you get into these classes or these sessions and the topic comes up, who is there to mentor this process? Who is overseeing this? Because I was told specifically of kids, by kids, for kids. And we found out that there was indeed a young lady who was handling this class, whose identity was held from me because I would harass her, according to the board. We found out who it was, and she had a book review online too. And her book review was Kevin the Unicorn. And all days are not rainbow days. Yeah. Okay, let's close the loop.
Yeah. Safe,
open, gender issues, unicorns, rainbows. Is it just me? I don't think so.
Okay, so in the last minute, when's the next meeting that you need people at?
Yeah.
When is it?
It's right March. Tuesday. Heavens, I've forgotten the exact.
Well, that's okay. You look that up real quick for us. And folks, what's really important is now, as I always talk about at the end of the program, which we're getting to, is that you got to get your feet on the street. And this is a absolutely call to all the people, as well as congregants that fit this higher percentage rate that's up on the chart. We have 22 churches, and the mega church that's located in Geauga County doesn't realize it's in Geauga County, so it's not listed as a Geauga County church.
Yeah.
And they've got thousands and thousands of people there, and they don't even know what county they're in. But the bottom line is, we need your feet on the street. What's the date?
It is Tuesday, March 17th, Election Day here.
And what time?
It is at 4 p.m., and it is at the Chardon Library, not at the admin building. This one's at the Chardon Library.
Okay. All right, good. All right. So all of you folks that live in Geauga County, Ohio, This is a call of action out to you to get involved. And here's a time now that you have a direct input into the board. Instead of 5, why don't we have 500? Why don't, let's get a good number of folks that'll show up election day. So here it's easy to remember.
Yeah.
And it's at what time again?
4 p.m. at the Chardon Library, Tuesday, March 17th.
All right, so Sam Adams, he always called people to action, and they rallied together. And those anti-federalists, they absolutely got it right, and that's why we have what we have today, is to fight for what is right.